I'm Amanda, 27 years old, and I've always been the invisible daughter. At Thanksgiving dinner, my mother's eyes sparkled with pride as she announced, "Your brother just bought a gorgeous home in Oakwood Hills." Everyone erupted in applause while I sat quietly, my recent promotion hanging on my lips. When the cheering subsided, I finally spoke up. "That's great. But did anyone know I just got promoted to senior marketing director at my firm?" The room fell silent. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you've ever felt overlooked by your family during holiday gatherings. The Thanksgiving table at my parents' suburban home in Westfield looked like something out of a magazine. Mom had outdone herself as usual with the decorations, a centerpiece of autumn leaves, miniature pumpkins, and cinnamon-scented candles running down the middle of the table. The dining room smelled of roast turkey, freshly baked rolls, and the lingering scent of pumpkin pie cooling on the kitchen counter. This was Patricia Anderson's specialty, creating the perfect holiday atmosphere that belonged on a greeting card. Our family had gathered in full force. Dad, Robert, was carving the turkey with surgical precision, a skill he'd mastered over 30 years of Thanksgiving dinners. My brother Jason, the golden child at 30 years old, sat with his wife Grace beside him. They'd been married for 3 years and were the picture-perfect couple, both attractive, successful, and constantly receiving my parents' adoration. Aunt Marie and Uncle Frank had driven in from Connecticut, completing our intimate family gathering. I'd arrived early that morning to help Mom with preparations, something Jason never did. While peeling potatoes and chopping vegetables, I listened to Mom talk about Jason's latest accomplishments at his financial consulting firm. "Your brother's doing so well," she kept saying, her voice filled with unmistakable pride. "He's got big news today." When I'd asked what the news was, she just smiled mysteriously and said, "He should be the one to tell everyone." This wasn't new. Growing up, our family dynamic had always centered around Jason. As the star quarterback in high school who earned a football scholarship to college, his trophies dominated the living room display case. My academic certificates and honor roll recognitions were tucked away in a drawer somewhere, occasionally acknowledged with a distracted, "That's nice, honey." I still remember my high school graduation when I was named valedictorian. It should have been my special day. But somehow the conversation at dinner afterward turned to Jason's first year at college and his promising future. When I brought up my scholarship to a prestigious university, Dad nodded and quickly pivoted to asking Jason about his upcoming summer internship. It wasn't that my parents didn't love me. They did in their way. But Jason's outgoing personality and conventional achievements were easier for them to understand and celebrate. My quieter, more intellectual successes often went unnoticed. I'd spent years perfecting the art of the congratulatory smile while swallowing my disappointment. As an adult, I still struggled with this dynamic. Part of me felt childish for wanting my parents' approval and recognition. Shouldn't I have outgrown this need by now? Yet another part of me, the part that had worked incredibly hard for every achievement, still yearned for them to see me, really see me, just once. Mom had hinted at big news coming at dinner all morning as we prepared the meal together. I had my own news to share, a significant promotion that I'd earned through months of overtime and brilliant campaign work. I practiced how I would announce it, imagining my parents' proud faces. Maybe this Thanksgiving would be different. "Amanda, would you set the table with the good china?" Mom called from the kitchen, interrupting my thoughts. "Jason and Grace will be here any minute." I carefully arranged the plates in silverware, taking extra time to fold the cloth napkins into perfect triangles. Through the window, I saw Jason's new luxury SUV pull into the driveway. Mom immediately abandoned the cranberry sauce she was stirring and rushed to the door. "My boy is here," she exclaimed, throwing her arms around Jason as he entered. Grace received a warm hug as well, followed by excited chatter about their drive over. I stood in the dining room doorway, waiting my turn for a greeting. Eventually, Mom noticed me and said, "Amanda, don't just stand there. Take their coats, will you?" And just like that, I was relegated to my usual role, the helper, the background character in the story of Jason's life. My path to becoming a marketing director wasn't easy. I graduated summa cum laude with a marketing degree from Boston University, where I spent countless nights studying while working part-time to supplement my scholarship. After graduation, I landed an entry-level position at Marshall & Reed, a competitive marketing firm in Boston that was known for its cutthroat environment, but excellent training ground for ambitious professionals. The early years were brutal. I worked 60-hour weeks, often staying at the office until midnight to perfect presentations and campaign proposals, while former classmates posted photos of exotic vacations and weekend brunches on social media. I was hunched over my laptop, analyzing market trends and consumer behavior patterns. But I was determined to succeed in an industry where women often hit glass ceilings before reaching leadership positions. 3 months ago, our firm pitched a rebranding campaign to Luminous Tech, a rising tech company seeking to reposition itself in the marketplace. The stakes were incredibly high. This account would be worth millions. The project was initially assigned to our senior team. But after their first proposal flopped, I approached my director, Samantha, with a bold alternative strategy. "This is risky," she had said, reviewing my presentation. "But it might be exactly what they need." Samantha gave me the chance to lead the revised pitch. I spent 3 weeks preparing, barely sleeping, researching every aspect of the tech industry and the client's competition. My approach focused on authentic storytelling rather than flashy graphics, a departure from our firm's usual style. When presentation day came, I delivered a pitch that left the Luminous Tech executives nodding and engaged. By the end, their CEO was leaning forward, asking detailed questions about implementation. We won the account. Not only that, but Luminous requested that I personally oversee their marketing transformation. This victory led directly to my promotion to Senior Marketing Director, a position typically reserved for people at least 10 years into their career. At 27, I had shattered expectations. The promotion came with a substantial salary increase that would finally allow me to start seriously saving for a home of my own. Currently, I lived in a small one-bedroom apartment in Cambridge, with rent that consumed too much of my previous salary. I'd been meticulously saving what I could, creating detailed spreadsheets of potential neighborhoods and mortgage calculations, dreaming of the day I could stop paying someone else's mortgage and start building equity. What my family didn't see were the sacrifices behind my success. My relationship with Tyler had ended 2 months ago after 3 years together. "I feel like I'm dating your job," he'd said during our final argument. "There's no room for me in your life." His words stung because they contained a grain of truth. I had canceled dates for work emergencies, fallen asleep during movies after exhausting weeks, and postponed vacations when important projects came up. The night I received my promotion, the first person I called wasn't my family, it was my best friend Rachel. "I got it." I had practically screamed into the phone. "The promotion? Amanda, that's amazing." Rachel's genuine excitement was exactly what I needed. "Senior Marketing Director at 27? You're basically a legend." I can't believe they chose me. There were at least 3 other candidates with more experience. Experience isn't everything. You have vision and drive. "They'd be idiots not to promote you," Rachel said. "Have you told your parents yet?" My excitement dimmed slightly. "No, I'm saving it for Thanksgiving. Mom said Jason has big news too. So I'll wait and share mine then." Rachel's silence spoke volumes. She'd witnessed my family dynamic firsthand over the years. "Just promise me something," she finally said. "Don't let them diminish this achievement. This is huge, Amanda. If they don't recognize that, it's their loss." I promised Rachel I would stand my ground, but as Thanksgiving approached, my confidence wavered. Would my news be overshadowed again? Would my parents actually care about my professional milestone? Or would Jason's announcement, whatever it was, take center stage as usual? Despite these doubts, I arrived at Thanksgiving with hope. This promotion wasn't just another good grade or minor accomplishment. This was career-defining. Surely this time would be different. The kitchen was a flurry of activity as I helped Mom with the final dinner preparations. I mashed potatoes with a rhythmic determination while she basted the turkey one last time before returning it to the oven. "The table looks beautiful, Amanda," Mom said. The first genuine compliment she'd given me all day. "You always had an eye for those little details." I smiled, appreciating the rare acknowledgement. "Thanks, Mom. I thought the burgundy napkins would look nice with the fall centerpiece." Before she could respond, the front door burst open with a gust of cold November air. Jason and Grace made their entrance. Both dressed impeccably, he in a tailored blue sweater that matched his eyes, she in an elegant cream dress with a cashmere cardigan. They carried a bottle of expensive champagne and a bouquet of seasonal flowers. "Something smells amazing," Jason announced, his voice carrying through the house. He gave Mom a side hug. careful not to wrinkle his outfit. Grace made her famous pumpkin cheesecake for dessert. Mom gasped with delight, taking the perfectly presented dessert from Grace's hands. You shouldn't have gone to all that trouble. But I'm so glad you did. Your cheesecake is divine. I continued mashing potatoes, trying not to think about the 3 hours I'd spent making my grandmother's traditional apple pie that now sat ignored on the counter. Dad emerged from his study, face lighting up at the sight of Jason. They exchanged hearty handshakes that evolved into a backslapping hug. There he is. The man of the hour, Dad said, beaming with pride. Can't wait to hear your big news, son. Jason grinned mysteriously. All in good time, Dad. Let's get through dinner first. Aunt Marie and Uncle Frank arrived shortly after. Completing our Thanksgiving gathering, Uncle Frank immediately engaged Jason in conversation about the stock market, while Aunt Marie joined Mom and Grace in admiring the table setting. Amanda, be a dear and get the ice water for the table, Mom called over her shoulder, not noticing that I was elbow-deep in cranberry sauce preparation. Dinner was finally served at 4 o'clock. We took our seats around the table, Jason and Grace on one side, me on the other, with my parents at either end and Aunt and Uncle filling in the remaining chairs. Dad stood to deliver his annual Thanksgiving toast. I'm thankful for this wonderful family gathered here today, he began, glass raised high. For Patricia's incredible meal, for good health, and for the successes we've celebrated this year. His eyes landed proudly on Jason. Some of us have had particularly impressive accomplishments, which we'll hear about shortly. Family is what matters most, and seeing my children thriving brings me the greatest joy. I noticed the plural children, but his gaze never shifted to include me in that sentiment. The meal progressed with the usual Thanksgiving conversations, compliments about the food, discussions about the unusually mild weather, and Aunt Marie's updates about cousins I rarely saw. I tried several times to join various conversations but kept finding myself cut off mid-sentence or spoken over as if I hadn't been speaking at all. So Amanda, still at that marketing place? Uncle Frank asked during a brief lull, the first direct question anyone had posed to me all evening. Yes, actually I have some news about Jason, Mom interrupted, unable to contain herself any longer. I think it's time you shared your surprise with everyone. All attention immediately shifted to my brother, who exchanged a knowing glance with Grace before breaking into a wide smile. Well, he began, reaching for Grace's hand. As some of you already know, I've been doing really well at the firm this year. That promotion to senior investment advisor came with a pretty substantial bonus. Approving nods circled the table. Dad looked like he might burst with pride. Grace and I have been talking about putting down roots, starting the next chapter of our lives together, Jason continued. And we found the perfect place to do it. Mom could no longer contain herself. Your brother just bought a gorgeous home in Oakwood Hills, she announced, her voice elevated with excitement. Gasps and exclamations followed. Oakwood Hills was the most prestigious neighborhood in the area, known for its sprawling properties and exclusive community. It's a 4-bedroom colonial on Willow Lane, Jason added. Over 3,000 square feet, with a 3-car garage and a backyard that backs up to the nature preserve. Tell them about the kitchen, Grace urged. Custom cabinetry, marble countertops, top-of-the-line appliances, Jason listed off. The previous owners were gourmet cooks who renovated right before deciding to downsize. How wonderful, Aunt Marie gushed. When can we see it? We get the keys next week, Grace said. We're planning a housewarming party after the holidays. This calls for the champagne, Dad declared, rising to retrieve the bottle Jason and Grace had brought. For the next 20 minutes, the conversation revolved entirely around my brother's new home. The master bathroom with its heated floors and soaking tub. The home office with built-in bookshelves. The finished basement that would become a media room. The neighborhood amenities and property values. The plans for decorating and furnishing each room. I sat quietly, pushing food around my plate, my appetite diminishing with each enthusiastic question and response. My promotion news felt increasingly insignificant in the face of Jason's grand announcement. Would anyone even care after this? Amanda, isn't it wonderful? Mom asked, finally remembering my existence. Your brother, a homeowner in Oakwood Hills. Who would have thought? Something in me snapped. Maybe it was the dismissive who would have thought, as if Jason's success was somehow unexpected despite years of favoritism. Maybe it was the realization that once again, my achievement would be treated as an afterthought. Or maybe it was simply years of built-up frustration finally finding its release. That's great. But did anyone know I just got promoted to senior marketing director at my firm? I said, my voice stronger and clearer than I'd intended. The room fell utterly silent. 5 pairs of eyes turned to stare at me, expressions ranging from surprise to confusion to, in my mother's case, slight annoyance at the interruption. The only sound was the gentle ticking of the antique clock on the mantel and the distant hum of the refrigerator from the kitchen. Dad froze with the champagne bottle poised over Jason's glass. Ember liquid suspended mid-pour. Jason's smile faltered, his eyebrows drawing together in an unreadable expression. Grace looked down at her plate, suddenly very interested in arranging her remaining green beans. Aunt Marie's mouth formed a small O of surprise, while Uncle Frank's bushy eyebrows shot upward. My mother recovered first, clearing her throat. "Oh, that's nice, dear," she said with the same tone she might use to acknowledge I'd bought a new pair of shoes. Now, about Jason's master bathroom. They're putting in one of those rainfall shower heads that are so popular now. The dismissal was so immediate, so complete, that for a second I thought I might have imagined speaking at all. The conversation pivoted back to Jason's house as if I'd never made my announcement, with Mom eagerly describing the bathroom fixtures as if she'd designed them herself. I sat paralyzed, my fork suspended above my plate, as a wave of hurt washed over me. Not even a single follow-up question. Not even a perfunctory congratulations. Nothing. Jason, to his credit, seemed uncomfortable with the situation. He glanced at me across the table and offered a quick "Congrats, sis. That's really great," before Mom pulled his attention back to a question about the property taxes on his new home. I felt my face grow hot with a mixture of embarrassment and anger. The promotion I'd worked countless hours for, sacrificed relationships for, poured my entire being into achieving, reduced to "that's nice" before being immediately forgotten. In that moment, 27 years of similar dismissals crystallized into a single, painful reality. In this family, my achievements would never matter the way Jason's did. Would anyone like more stuffing? I asked mechanically, rising from my chair. No one responded. All still enraptured by Jason's description of the crown molding in his formal dining room. I moved to the kitchen on unsteady legs, the turkey platter a convenient excuse for my exit. Once safely behind the swinging door, I placed the platter on the counter and gripped the edge of the sink, breathing deeply to regain my composure. The tears came anyway, hot and unwelcome, blurring my vision. "Stupid," I whispered to myself. "What did you expect?" I ran cold water and splashed my face, careful not to smudge my makeup. The last thing I needed was to return to the table with obvious signs of crying. I busied myself with transferring desserts to serving plates, grateful for the task to occupy my shaking hands. The kitchen door swung open, and I quickly turned back to the sink, pretending to wash a serving spoon. I expected Mom coming to chastise me for my outburst or to ask for help with dessert. Instead, Aunt Marie's gentle voice broke the silence. "That's quite an achievement, Amanda. Senior marketing director at your age is remarkable." I turned slowly, unsure if I was being mocked. But Aunt Marie's smile was genuine, her eyes warm with real interest. "Thank you," I managed, my voice slightly hoarse. "Tell me about it," she said, leaning against the counter. "What does the promotion entail?" The simple question, the acknowledgement that my news deserved elaboration, nearly undid me again. I took a steadying breath and began explaining the Luminous Tech campaign, my role in securing the client, and what my new position would involve. Aunt Marie listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions about the industry and my responsibilities. "Your parents don't always understand career achievements that fall outside their experience," she said when I finished. Her voice lowered conspiratorially. "Especially your mother. Did you know she wanted to go to college for interior design?" This was news to me. Mom had always been just a homemaker as far as I knew, seemingly content with that role. "Grandpa wouldn't pay for it," Aunt Marie continued. "Said it wasn't a practical career for a woman who'd eventually stay home with children anyway. She's carried that disappointment her whole life, though she'd never admit it. Sometimes I think she lives vicariously through Jason because his life followed the traditional path she understands: college, career, marriage, house. And my path doesn't fit her narrative." I said, the realization dawning. "Exactly. It's not that she isn't proud of you, Amanda. She just doesn't know how to express it because your choices remind her of roads not taken. This perspective gave me pause. I'd never considered that Mom's apparent indifference might stem from her own unresolved regrets. Still, I said after a moment, "It hurts to be constantly overlooked." "Of course it does," Aunt Marie agreed. "And you deserve better recognition. Just know that their reactions aren't always about you." The kitchen door swung open again, and Mom appeared with an empty gravy boat. She glanced between us suspiciously. "What are you two whispering about?" "We're waiting for dessert," she said. "Just catching up," Aunt Marie replied smoothly. "Amanda was telling me about her promotion. Quite impressive, Patricia." Mom's lips tightened almost imperceptibly. "Yes, well, let's get the pies served. Jason and Grace need to head home at a reasonable hour. They're meeting their realtor early tomorrow to discuss paint colors." With a meaningful glance at me, Aunt Marie took the dessert plates and followed Mom back to the dining room. I remained in the kitchen a moment longer, gathering my composure and making a decision. The thought of sitting through dessert while the conversation inevitably circled back to Jason's house was unbearable. I entered the dining room with the apple pie I'd baked and placed it on the table. "I'm actually going to head out," I announced. "I'm not feeling well." "But it's Thanksgiving," Mom protested. "We haven't even had dessert. And we always watch the holiday movie together afterward." "I know, but I've got a migraine coming on." The lie came easily. I should get home before it gets worse. "Dinner was lovely, thank you." Dad looked confused but nodded. "Feel better, kiddo?" Jason gave me a strange look, something like guilt flickering across his features. "Hope you feel better, sis. Call me tomorrow." I nodded noncommittally, gave quick hugs to everyone except Mom, who was busy serving Grace a slice of pumpkin pie, and slipped out before anyone could protest further. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and unshed tears. By the time I reached my apartment, the emotional dam had broken completely. I kicked off my shoes, collapsed onto my couch, and finally allowed myself to cry for the unacknowledged promotion, for years of feeling second best, and for the painful recognition that some family dynamics might never change. My apartment felt particularly empty that night. The silence, normally a welcome respite after busy workdays, now seemed to amplify my thoughts as they spiraled between anger, hurt, and embarrassment. I changed into comfortable clothes and curled up on my couch, a cup of tea cooling on the coffee table beside me. The rational part of my brain knew that leaving Thanksgiving dinner early was slightly dramatic. The emotional part didn't care. For once, I prioritized my own well-being over family expectations. And despite the guilt tugging at the edges of my consciousness, there was something liberating about it. I reached for my phone and called Rachel. "Shouldn't you be in a turkey coma surrounded by family right now?" she answered. "I left early," I said, my voice still thick with emotion. "It was a disaster." "Oh no. What happened?" I recounted the evening's events. Jason's house announcement, my mother's excessive enthusiasm, my impulsive decision to share my promotion news, and the dismissive aftermath. Rachel listened without interrupting, making occasional sounds of sympathy. "So I just left," I concluded. "Claimed I had a migraine and walked out before dessert." "Good for you," Rachel said firmly. "That whole situation is toxic. Your promotion to senior director at 27 is incredible, Amanda. Most people work decades to reach that level. If your family can't see how extraordinary that is, that's their failure, not yours." "I know you're right, but it still hurts," I admitted. "Why do I still care so much about their approval? Shouldn't I have outgrown that by now?" "It's human nature to want validation from your parents," Rachel said gently. "The fact that you care doesn't make you weak or childish. But maybe it's time to reconsider how much weight you give their opinions." We talked for nearly an hour, Rachel's perspective helping to soothe my raw emotions. Before hanging up, she made me promise not to spend Black Friday shopping with my mother, as we'd done every year since I was a teenager. "Break the pattern," she advised. "Start your own tradition instead. Do something that celebrates you in this amazing achievement." After ending the call, I turned off my phone entirely, something I rarely did even on weekends. The thought of my mother calling to lecture me about my rudeness or my father's awkward attempts at peacemaking was too much to bear. Instead, I ran a hot bath, poured a glass of wine, and allowed myself to fully disconnect from family expectations for the first time in memory. The next morning, instead of meeting my mother for our traditional Black Friday shopping, I slept in until 9, a rare luxury. My phone remained off. I made myself a proper breakfast, something more elaborate than my usual rushed coffee and granola bar, and savored each bite while watching the morning sunlight play across my small living room. The weekend became an unexpected journey of self-discovery. Without family obligations or work deadlines pressing on me, I rediscovered interests I'd neglected. I pulled out my watercolors and painted for the first time in months, losing myself in the meditative flow of creating something purely for enjoyment. I went for a long run along the Charles River, the cold November air filling my lungs and clearing my mind. I browsed in my favorite bookstore for hours, eventually purchasing 3 novels I'd been meaning to read. By Sunday evening, I felt transformed. The hurt from Thanksgiving hadn't disappeared, but it had softened, contextualized by a weekend of reconnecting with myself, outside of both family expectations and professional ambitions. When I finally turned my phone back on, there were 7 missed calls from my mother, 3 from my father, and surprisingly, 2 from Jason. I ignored them all, sending a brief group text. Needed some time to myself. I'm fine. We'll call later this week. Monday morning, I walked into the office with a new sense of confidence. My nameplate had been updated on my office door. Amanda Mitchell, Senior Marketing Director. Seeing it in print sent a wave of pride through me that had nothing to do with family validation and everything to do with my own hard work. Samantha, my mentor and the firm's executive director, stopped by mid-morning with a coffee. "How was your Thanksgiving?" she asked, settling into the chair across from my desk. "Honestly? Not great," I replied, surprising myself with my candor. My family didn't really acknowledge my promotion. They were too busy celebrating my brother's new house. Samantha nodded thoughtfully. Family dynamics are complicated. When I made partner at my first firm, my father asked when I was going to find time to meet a husband. We shared a knowing laugh, the kind that comes from mutual understanding of a particular type of struggle. "What I've learned," Samantha continued, "is that professional recognition and family validation are often separate currencies. Some people never learn to value the currency you trade in, and that's their limitation, not yours." "I'm starting to realize that," I said. "The promotion committee wasn't impressed by your family connection or your personal life," Samantha reminded me. "They were impressed by your strategic thinking, your client management skills, and your leadership potential. Those qualities have value regardless of whether your mother understands what a senior directorship means." Her words resonated deeply. For years, I'd been seeking a type of validation my family might never be equipped to give. Perhaps it was time to fully separate my sense of professional worth from their understanding of it. "Thanks, Samantha. That helps put things in perspective." "Anytime," she replied, standing to leave. "By the way, the Luminous Tech team wants to take you to dinner next week to discuss expanding their campaign. They specifically requested you by name." After she left, I sat at my desk absorbing the significance of that information. Clients requesting me by name. A promotion earned through merit. Respect from industry peers who understood the value of my work. Perhaps these were the validations that should matter most. For the first time, I began to truly believe that my worth wasn't diminished by my family's failure to recognize it. This realization didn't erase the hurt, but it created space for something new to grow in its place, a more resilient sense of self that drew strength from within rather than from external approval. The following Saturday, I was deep into reorganizing my apartment closet, another neglected task I'd finally found time for, when a knock at my door interrupted my progress. Assuming it was a package delivery, I opened the door without checking the peephole, still wearing old leggings and a paint-stained Harvard sweatshirt. Mom stood in the hallway, her expression a complex mixture of concern and irritation. "You haven't been answering my calls," she said by way of greeting. I was worried. I stared at her for a moment, genuinely surprised by her unexpected appearance. Mom rarely visited my apartment, having deemed it too small, and in such a busy area when I first moved in. "I've been busy," I replied, stepping aside to let her in. "Work has been hectic." Mom entered, her eyes scanning my living space with barely concealed judgment. She was impeccably dressed as always, her cashmere sweater and tailored slacks making me suddenly self-conscious about my disheveled appearance and the state of my apartment, which was currently strewn with items from my closet purge. "I was organizing," I explained unnecessarily. "Can I get you some tea?" "That would be nice." While I prepared the tea in my tiny kitchen, Mom perched uncomfortably on the edge of my sofa, looking out of place among my eclectic, budget-friendly decor. The contrast between us had never felt more apparent, her traditional elegance versus my more contemporary, somewhat chaotic style. "So," I said, placing a mug of tea in front of her, "what brings you all the way into the city on a Saturday?" "You left Thanksgiving without dessert," she said, as if this explained everything. "And then you didn't show up for Black Friday shopping. It's our tradition." I needed some time to myself. "Because of what happened at dinner?" she asked, her tone suggesting she found this reasoning immature. "Amanda, you can't just leave family gatherings whenever you feel slighted." The word slighted ignited something in me. How perfectly it diminished my feelings, making them sound petty and inconsequential. "Slighted?" I repeated. "Is that what you think happened?" "Well, you certainly seem jealous of Jason's news. That outburst about your promotion was hardly appropriate timing." I took a deep breath, remembering Aunt Marie's words about my mother's own unfulfilled ambitions. Getting defensive wouldn't lead to understanding. "It wasn't an outburst, Mom. It was an attempt to share something important in my life with my family." "You could have waited until after Jason's moment," she countered. "He and Grace were so excited about their house." "When would have been the right time?" I asked quietly. "After dessert, when everyone was focused on the football game. The next family gathering when it would be old news. There's never a right time for my achievements in this family." Mom's expression shifted from irritation to surprise. "What are you talking about? Of course we care about your achievements." "Do you?" "Because I can't remember the last time one of my accomplishments was celebrated the way Jason's are." "Do you even understand what this promotion means?" "It means you got a raise and a better title," Mom said dismissively. "That's lovely, Amanda, but a home is a major life milestone. It's natural that would take precedence." "A senior directorship at 27 isn't just lovely, Mom. It's exceptional. People work for decades to reach this level. I beat out candidates with twice my experience because I developed a revolutionary campaign strategy that won a multi-million-dollar client." My voice had risen slightly, years of bottled frustration beginning to surface. Mom looked taken aback by my intensity. "I'm sure it's very impressive in your world," she said carefully. "But family homes are something everyone understands. Your career is more specialized." "That's exactly the problem," I said, the realization crystallizing as I spoke. "You don't try to understand my world. You've never asked about my work beyond surface questions. You've never visited my office or shown interest in my projects. But you can describe every detail of Jason's house without ever having seen it." Mom's face flushed. "That's not fair. Jason's life is just more relatable. A house, a wife. A straightforward career path. More relatable to you," I corrected. "Because it fits your idea of success." A tense silence fell between us. Mom sipped her tea, her eyes darting around my apartment as if seeking an escape from this uncomfortable conversation. Finally, she set down her mug with a decisive clink. "I didn't come here to argue," she said. "I came to make sure you were all right and to tell you that your behavior hurt Jason's feelings. He was excited to share his news with everyone." "And what about my feelings?" I countered. "Did it occur to anyone that dismissing my promotion after years of hard work might hurt me?" Mom looked genuinely perplexed. "But you've always been the strong one, Amanda. The independent one who doesn't need validation. Jason is more sensitive." This characterization stunned me into momentary silence. Was that how they saw me? As needing less support and recognition because I appeared self-sufficient? The irony was almost painful. "Mom," I said carefully, "being independent doesn't mean I don't want my family to care about my achievements. It doesn't mean I don't need support or recognition." Something in my tone must have finally reached her, because Mom's defensive posture softened slightly. She looked at me, really looked at me, perhaps for the first time in years. "I don't understand your world," she admitted after a long pause. "The corporate ladder, the campaigns, the clients, it's all foreign to me. When you talk about your work, I don't know the right questions to ask." "You could try," I suggested gently. "You could ask what my day-to-day responsibilities are, or what challenges I face, or even just what I enjoy about my job." Mom was quiet for a moment, absently tracing the rim of her mug with one manicured fingertip. "Did you know I wanted to be an interior designer?" she asked suddenly, despite Aunt Marie having already shared this information. I shook my head, giving Mom space to tell her own story. I had a portfolio prepared for design school. Your grandfather refused to pay for it, said it wasn't practical. A bitter smile crossed her face. I met your father the next year, got married at 22 and had Jason by 24. The design dreams got packed away with my portfolio. I didn't know. I said softly, though it was only partially true. Sometimes. Mom hesitated. Sometimes when you talk about your career, your independence, your city apartment, it reminds me of paths I didn't take. Choices I didn't get to make. The admission hung in the air between us, fragile and unexpected. For the first time, I saw my mother not just as a parent who had failed to acknowledge me, but as a complex person with her own unresolved regrets and projections. That doesn't make it okay to ignore my achievements, I said finally, unwilling to let the moment of vulnerability erase the legitimate hurt. But it helps me understand better. Mom nodded, a small concession but significant coming from her. I'm not very good at this. Talking about feelings, acknowledging when I've made mistakes. Your father and I both come from families where these things weren't discussed. We could try something different, I suggested. Maybe a dinner with just the four of us, you, Dad, Jason, and me. No holiday pressure. No extended family. Just a chance to reset how we communicate. Mom considered this, then nodded slowly. I think your father would like that. And I would too. It wasn't an apology, not explicitly. But it was an opening, a crack in the rigid family dynamic that had shaped our interactions for as long as I could remember. And I'll try, Mom added unexpectedly, to understand your world better. To ask better questions. As she prepared to leave a short while later, she paused at the door. Senior Marketing Director, she said, testing the words. That does sound impressive, Amanda. I'm proud of you. The words were slightly stiff, unpracticed, but they were sincere. And for now, that was enough to start building something new from the fragments of what had been broken. A month later, my apartment underwent a transformation. I'd spent the weekend deep cleaning, rearranging furniture, and even splurging on fresh flowers for the dinner table. Tonight would be the first time my parents and Jason would visit for a meal prepared by me, a small but significant shift in our family dynamic. The pasta sauce simmered on the stove, filling the apartment with the aroma of basil and garlic. I'd chosen an Italian menu, relatively simple but elegant enough to make the evening feel special. As I chopped vegetables for the salad, I realized my hands were trembling slightly with nervous energy. It's just dinner, I told myself. Not a performance review. But in many ways, this felt more high stakes than any professional presentation. The conversation with Mom 4 weeks ago had opened a door, but what lay beyond it remained uncertain. Would this dinner be the beginning of a new understanding, or would we fall back into familiar patterns? The doorbell rang at exactly 6:30, Dad's military punctuality in action. I took a deep breath, smoothed my dress, and opened the door with what I hoped was a relaxed smile. Welcome, I said, ushering them in. My parents entered first, Mom carrying a gift bag that she handed to me with uncharacteristic shyness. Jason followed, looking slightly uncomfortable in the unfamiliar setting of my apartment. For you, Mom said, nodding at the bag. A little late, but better than never. Inside was a sleek leather portfolio embossed with my initials and new title. Accompanying it was a card signed by both parents that read simply, "Congratulations on your well-deserved promotion. We are proud of you." The simplicity of the message, its straightforward acknowledgement, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. Thank you, I said, looking between them. This is perfect. Dad cleared his throat. We should have made a bigger deal of it at Thanksgiving. That's on us. Coming from my father, a man of few words and fewer emotional expressions, this was practically a soliloquy. I smiled, genuinely touched by the effort. Dinner progressed with an initial awkwardness that gradually eased as we shared the meal. The conversation remained somewhat superficial at first, safe topics like the unseasonably warm December weather and a recent local news story. But as we moved to dessert, Jason surprised me by asking a question that would have been unthinkable a month ago. So tell me about this luminous tech campaign, he said, leaning forward with what appeared to be genuine interest. Mom mentioned it was pretty groundbreaking. What made your approach different? The question opened a floodgate. I explained the strategy I'd developed, the risk it represented, and why it had resonated with the client. To my surprise, both parents listened attentively. asking follow-up questions that indicated they were truly trying to understand. "It's like what you did with the Peterson account last year," Dad said to Jason, finding an unexpected angle that the client hadn't considered. The comparison was his way of translating my achievement into terms he understood. And I appreciated the effort rather than being offended by it. Jason nodded, drawing his own parallels between our different industries. "Different fields, same principle," he agreed. "That's impressive strategic thinking, sis." When the conversation eventually turned to Jason's new house, it felt balanced rather than one-sided. I asked genuine questions about their renovation plans, and when Mom started to dominate the conversation with excessive details, Dad gently redirected. "We should hear about Amanda's condo search too," he said. "You mentioned you were starting to look?" The fact that he remembered this detail from a brief text conversation weeks ago demonstrated a new level of attention that warmed me from within. "I've been pre-approved for a mortgage," I shared. "Nothing like Oakwood Hills, of course, but there are some nice condos in Cambridge within my range." "That's fantastic," Jason said. "First-time homebuyer programs can be really helpful with the down payment. I could connect you with our mortgage broker if you want." "I'd appreciate that," I replied, realizing I meant it. Without the weight of constant comparison and competition, accepting his help didn't feel like admitting inferiority. As the evening wound down, I felt a subtle but significant shift in our family's gravitational center. We hadn't become a perfect, emotionally articulate family overnight. There were still awkward moments and old habits that threatened to resurface. But there was also a new awareness, a conscious effort to create space for each other's different versions of success. Over the following months, this new dynamic continued to evolve. Mom occasionally sent articles about marketing campaigns she thought might interest me, her way of trying to understand my world. Dad called just to check in rather than only when he needed technical support with his computer. Jason and I established a monthly lunch date where we intentionally didn't talk about work, rediscovering shared interests beyond our professional identities. My career continued to flourish. The Luminous Tech campaign exceeded projections, cementing my reputation within the firm and the industry. By spring, I was looking seriously at a 2-bedroom condo in a riverside development. Smaller than Jason's house, certainly, but perfect for my needs and a solid investment. When I invited my family to view the condo before making an offer, they all came not out of obligation but genuine support. Mom refrained from comparing it to Jason's house, instead noting design elements she thought would complement my style. Dad discussed the building's structural soundness with unexpected knowledge. Jason offered practical advice about the closing process. Standing in what might become my future living room, watching my family engage with this milestone in my life, I reflected on how much had changed since that Thanksgiving dinner. The hurt hadn't disappeared entirely. Deep-rooted family dynamics rarely heal completely, but it had transformed into something constructive, a catalyst for necessary change. Sometimes the most important conversations begin with a single sentence, a moment of truth that disrupts comfortable patterns and demands attention. My impromptu announcement at Thanksgiving had been just that, not a petty bid for attention as Mom initially thought, but a necessary assertion of my value and place within our family. The journey from that moment to where we stood now hadn't been easy. It required honest conversations, uncomfortable realizations, and willingness on all sides to examine long-established patterns. But the result, a family relationship based on mutual respect rather than predetermined roles, was worth the difficult path. As I watch my family now, discussing paint colors and furniture arrangement in my potential new home, I realize that true validation doesn't come from constant external praise or recognition. It comes from being seen authentically, from having your unique journey acknowledged rather than measured against someone else's. Sometimes it takes one brave sentence to begin that process of being truly seen. What about you? Have you ever had to speak up to be recognized in your family? Has a single sentence ever changed your family dynamics? Share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you. Subscribe for more stories about family relationships and personal growth, and hit the notification bell to never miss an upload. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply to speak your truth, even when your voice shakes.